Please. I've done everything you've asked.
It has been many years, but this city will never be safe. Not whilst he is still out there.
All are pawns to the great deceiver.
Look at those red claws. Man, I didn't realize Eltharion's griffin looked so badass. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about Eltharion, this replay from Slayer. He said it was from a sub-faction speedrun tourney. I believe BBB Clan set that up. Can't help but notice that his opponent is playing Warriors of Chaos, who do not have any sub-factions, so I'm wondering the rules about that. But here we've got Eltharion under his own banner of Ivres, some spearmen, a couple of sword masters, a mage, metal mage of course, Plague of Rust, and some extra winds of magic, Lothern Sea Guard, a couple of archers, silver helms, and the Fireborn. Eltharion himself rocking Apotheosis, Soul Quench, and Tempest. Of course, he is a Lore of High Magic caster who can take a Griffin, and is a pretty decent fighter. Makes him kind of a unique fighter caster Griffin Lord for the High Elves. On the flip side, we've got the Dread Chicken himself, the Big Bird, Eltharion. We've got a couple of Manticores here, Marauder Horsemen, front line of Marauders, some Chosen, two Chosen, Mirror Guard. Build seems fairly familiar to what I would play in this matchup. I do quite like the Shielded Chosen here against High Elves, so let's see how they do. Eltharion's got his work cut out for him here. The Sword Masters might be able to deal with the Chosen, but in general there's a lot of threats to them. He's got Manticores to try and manage, plenty of Horsemen, and in general does appear to be pretty heavily outnumbered. Actually not quite so much on raw model count. Interesting. Very interesting. I guess there's a lot of cavalry units for the Warriors of Chaos, and maybe that is the reason why. Two single entity monsters as well, alongside Big Bird. Right now the archers just kind of probing away, keeping those Marauder Horsemen at a distance, not allowing them to get in and get any juicy shots on anything important. As a high caster, Eltharion does have the ability to heal himself with Apotheosis. Shield of Safri, also one of the best lore attributes in the game, map-wide 11% damage resistance for 9 seconds, which isn't a long time, but it is long enough to get some work done. Here, the Swordmasters had taken a little bit of initial damage there from that Searing Doom, I believe. Yeah, gonna get some regeneration from the Apotheosis. Meanwhile, Plague of Rust here on these Swordmasters does allow Mirror Guard to trade a little bit better into them. Eltharion, though, gonna pop his Tempest. He is one of the better air superiority lords because he's a Griffin and also pretty good combatant while having access to Tempest, of course, and high magic. Means he can come in and he captures the one Manticore out in the open, gets some pretty good RNG. This is actually a really risky situation for him to be going 2-on-1 here. Typically, the two Manticores would probably beat him, but right now they're not getting good RNG at all, and they're whiffing all of their attack animations, not getting any hits on Eltharion. A lot of that is due to him having 44 melee defense, of course. Got the Fang Sword of Eltharion up as well for that physical resistance, so even if he were to take hits, wouldn't be too impactful. But now Plague of Rust, countered with Apotheosis, goes down to 40 armor, still just canning those Manticores, and you can see from his health that they're really not getting hits on him. So part of that is purely due to RNG, part of that is due to the differential in stats, of course. But a very good engagement for Eltharion up in the air. Meanwhile, we take a look at the rest of the battle. Archers are being relatively well defended, defending themselves with their bows. Another Tempest goes off. Actually catches the second Manticore after the first one route. So Eltharion, you can see, eventually does start to take some damage. And did he actually hit himself with that Tempest? I don't think you can hit yourself with Tempest. I don't think it affects friendly units. But anyway, Dragon Princes are still alive here as well. The Fireborn going to try and support the Swordmasters, who have mostly lost out this frontline engagement. So what this means is Eltharion's probably going to have to cycle charge the Chosen out in the late game, which he can. 80 charge bonus is pretty good. Puts him below Carl, but I think it's better than Boris, I want to say. We'll have to compare him to some other Griffin Lords, like from the Empire after the fact. But looking good so far. The High Elves are starting to get a little bit compromised. The Chosen are just such an issue. They're so tanky. And given that the Swordmasters got taken out by various other things, it does look like they were able to trade into one unit of Chosen here. But even then, with such high melee defense and HP and everything, the Chosen also do punch back relatively well. You can see the Swordmasters just barely winning out there. Searing Doom on the Dragon Prince is going to generate some really nice value, and few units, even though only a few unit models got caught up there, they still took a lot of damage from that Searing Doom. It's such a great spell, and people are finally kind of waking up to that fact. And the Terror is definitely becoming a factor here. Eltharion getting some rear charges and rear attacks from these Chosen and other units is going to allow him to hopefully terrify away some of these High Elves. Meanwhile, where's Eltharion? He's way out in the corner over there, having chased off both of the Manticores, which is good. You know, in terms of damage value, they can punch way above their weight class, so good to get rid of them, but that has left the rest of his army in pretty dire straits. You can see things are kind of falling apart here for the most part. The Chosen are starting to grind through this back line. The Dragonborn, Fireborn rather, are done. Got Marauder Horsemen imminently threatening here, so things are definitely looking pretty desperate, and Eltharion's got some distance to cover before he can get back. So how much damage will the Warriors of Chaos be able to do before Dad gets home? I'm recording this on Father's Day, appropriately enough, even though you'll see it much later, I'm sure. Nice Searing Doom placement as well. I gotta love the baby blue color scheme for the High Elves. And maybe not quite baby blue, but you know what I mean. Love the scheme on the High Elves. Looks very regal, noble, if you will. But it does mean that the blood does show even greater, right? Which is definitely the effect of Big Bird's attacks here. The archers also desperately trying to get back to any kind of reinforcement. It's basically just Eltharion left, and granted, Eltharion's completely healthy, but can Eltharion cycle charge a quite healthy unit of Chosen in addition to all these other elements? In particular, the Plague of Rust means that if he gets caught up in a sustained melee engagement against the Chosen, that Plague of Rust will allow them to do a lot of damage to him. Another Searing Doom coming in here, and last infantry units are getting tear routed. Thankfully, a few of these Spearmen and other units do come back from rout in the nick of time. They're going to prevent Eltharion from suffering the air leadership penalties, which are honestly not that impactful anyway. But he's going to come in here and start to bully Big Bird. There's the Plague of Rust. And Horsemen and other units trying to move in to mass block Eltharion. Of course, the Javelins will also deal significant damage as well, but he just pummeled Sartharel right there. Did a massive amount of damage. This Fang Sword of Eltharion, given the magic damage it confers, I don't know if it's actually good to use it against Sartharel. He does have 25% magic resistance, so although you are getting more weapon damage, 25% more weapon damage, I guess that's directly offset. And maybe even more so considering it's only armor-piercing damage, so interesting. But the physical resistance is nice. Again, it doesn't work against the magical attacks of Sartharel, but against all the other incidental hits from the Javelins and other units, it does help. And full of High Elf infantry are rallying. We've got some Sea Guards and Archers back together, which is nice. They can kind of support each other. Spearmen also here to potentially provide a little bit of an anvil for Eltharion to cycle charge into. But let's see. Definitely very close at this point. Marauder Horsemasters charging in. They are actually Horsemasters, so they'll probably do fairly well in that engagement, but we'll see. Kind of keep that in the back as Eltharion takes another swipe at the Big Bird. Is Chosen, though. Man, there's 56 Chosen, 5,000 HP plus still remaining. Just absolute unit of Chosen, literally. Yeah, we'll fast forward maybe a little bit through this late game. Well, let's have a look here. It looks like Soul Quench is going to be used. A little bit of a nuke there. Helps to take out the last of the Mirror Guard. Probably, considering that he's just about at his healing cap, it's not like he needs to save for either Tempest or Apotheosis, right? So using that on the Soul Quench definitely makes sense at this late stage. Another drop on Big Bird. Ooh, but the Chosen are so close. This is really risky, and especially with the Marauder Horsemasters too. They could charge in and mass block here. They have not done so yet. Right now, just throwing their Javelins in here, but the Chosen move in. Here comes a pretty decisive Plague of Rust. This is all of a sudden very bad for Eltharion. Big Bird charges back in for one last pitch fight, trying to get enough damage. Javelins in the back. Big Bird down to 172 HP. goes down right as he turns to flee. That is pretty big as well. That does mean the Chosen are immediately going to suffer a leadership penalty. The question is, will it end up mattering? Eltharion's taking just such extreme damage here. I think one arrow maybe lands on the Horse Masters, and that's enough to put them below the terror threshold, and they then terror out away just from the mere presence of Eltharion. That being said, look at how much damage Eltharion's taken here. He is just about to rout from those Chosen Plague of Rust. The Chosen probably just got an insane amount of damage value. Yeah, up to 2,245 damage value for a shielded kind of defensive infantry unit. That's an insane amount of value to get. But Eltharion's not done. You know, he knows this is what he needs to do. Cycle charge in, take a chunk out of the side of the unit, and then try and get away. A little bit of Apotheosis, Fang Sword of Eltharion, so stacking the physical and damage resistance of Shield of Safri with that Fang Sword. Quite a good play, even if he does not get all of the healing from that Apotheosis. Still very sensible to do. There's 9 Sword Masters here coming back as well. Rider Rohan out there somewhere is cheering, no doubt, hoping for these 9 Sword Masters to make a difference. The Sea Guards whip their spears out as the Horse Masters charge in. And here comes Eltharion, dropping once more into the Chosen. Gets a really nice splash attack that also carries him directly into the center of the unit. Got a handful more Marauders and more Chosen coming back, which is an absolute nightmare. But Eltharion suddenly gets these Chosen very low on leadership. A couple of timely rare attacks from these Sea Guards. Man, you know it's desperate when you're a Sea Guard. You're having to fight a Chosen in melee. And here come the Sword Masters. Oh yeah, look at that charge over the hill with Eltharion following up. What a beautiful shot. Oh man. And that rear charge from the Sword Masters, they don't lose a single model, and they do trigger a terror rout. So that ends up proving very decisive. With that last unit of Chosen continuing to take damage, these other units are very likely to just hit army losses. One more charge. Okay, let's see. Still 9 Sword Masters. Oh, looks like a few of them go down there. But the finish is it imminent is the actual question here. Sword Masters actually give up, just about get killed to an elf. I guess 1 or 2 of them gets away. Then these Chosen also, they're done. They're not up to par for the 800 HP remaining on Eltharion. These other Chosen want to try their hand. There's 9 of them, or maybe they don't. Big thanks to Blitzen, aka Slayer3, for sending that one in. Great job to his opponent as well, Mr. Scare. Honestly, GG. Round of applause from me for both players. Excellent, excellent fight. Very back and forth. I love it. Silver Helms and the Fireborn definitely somewhat limited here. Archers, though, generate great value with the Lothern Sea Guard. Sword Masters also pretty much pay for themselves, which is nice to see. Warriors of Chaos, probably the best matchup for them besides Dwarfs. And look at Eltharion, 3,258 damage value. Eltharion's a character that often gets dismissed because Teclis and Elariel are so powerful. Tyrion's also pretty viable as well now in the right situation. And Eltharion often gets overlooked, but here I actually think makes a lot of sense, given that, Manticores are a potential danger here. Like, he'd probably fall apart against a really top-tier combatant like Kolek. But at the same time, Kolek's not a super common pick here. You can kind of play around that with a Plague of Rust and Archers and so on. Sarthrel also, reasonable job. Fighter, Caster, Demon Lord. Hyped for Tzeentch in Game 3, no doubt. Got some really nice value. Great value on these infantry as well, at least for 2 of them. The Mirror Guard, 1550 and 2708 final tally for those Chosen that couldn't quite pull it off in the end. The Plague of Rust from Sarthrel plus Chosen is a combination I've been using for a long time, and it is very good. Very, very good. Even before the mass changes, it was good. Now it's probably even better than it was before. Horse Masters, Horsemen, a handful, literally 2 of them, pay for the entire core, just about, because they themselves do so well. The other ones do not. Manticores are fairly limited, of course. Why Eltharion? So, yeah, air superiority-wise, Elariel also has Tempest, and because she has a little bit better healing, a lot of people will gravitate towards her. She also has the AoE immune to psychology and magic damage of this Boon of Isha, which is really good against, for example, undead factions. That being said, Eltharion is much better combatant. And less Winds of Magic, less healing, but still very competitive spell set. This Helm of Evress is pretty expensive to bring, but you can do some cheesy things with it by essentially forcing a Phoenix to get its rebirth proc, because it actually won't die. It will continuously re-roll the rebirth and will automatically get it. Fang Sword of Eltharion as well, pretty good as we saw there. Definitely the physical resistance is nice. Magic damage can be good in the right situation, can be a liability in the wrong situation. Mistwalker's Barrage, definitely not worth it. This thing basically does no damage, and especially considering High Elves, you're always trying to optimize cost, right? Like a typical loadout with him, 2 to 3 spells, and the Fang Sword probably. And that's just about it. And even then, quite expensive, all things considered, you know, in comparison to what you're getting. If we have a look, Empire doesn't have any caster Griffin characters for Lords, unfortunately. Which, you know, I don't really have caster Lords in general. I'm really hoping that will change at some point in the future. A little bit sad. But if we have a comparison, again, Boris is kind of, because he has his own self-healing, he's somewhat comparable. In a full kit, he is less expensive, and you also don't have to invest your Winds of Magic healing him, but then you also have to pay for a caster separately, right? Like, so even, you know, whatever cheapened down caster, often in matchups where you use Boris, you would see Laura Beasts, and whether or not you take this guy on a Griffin's up to you, but, you know, just a typical spell loadout. Kind of add the cost of these two together, and you're well over what Eltharion would set you back, right? So you get a little bit of a discount having your caster Lord all wrapped up into one. That also makes them somewhat more vulnerable as well, though. You can see baseline as well, slightly lower HP than Boris on a Griffin. Boris does have worse stats overall, less attack, defense, charge, armor, leadership, everything else, right? But that does get somewhat evened out by the fact that he's got these little buffs and debuffs here. Hold the line, crush the weak. White Cloak of Ulrich as well will kind of help even out some of those things. Eltharion does not get martial prowess up on the Griffin, should be noted. So these stats, so what you see is what you get here. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like fighter caster hybrid type Lords, Malekith is probably on a higher tier. You can take a higher tier mount, and it's, you know, more expensive. Although his spell kit is very good, it is more limited as well. And I mean, even with a pretty minimalist dragon kit, what I would take, he's still like 3,000 points almost, right? So significantly more expensive than Eltharion. You'd kind of expect him to be a tier up. Now, Azag's another interesting one, because he's kind of a flying caster fighter Lord hybrid, although not really much of a fighter given his low HP. It's got decent enough stats, but the HP of the Wyverns really needs a second look, I think. Will come in at a pretty similar cost bracket, fully kitted out to Eltharion. No self-healing, no air control, though. Does actually have more HP, looks like, than the Griffins, but again, no self-healing means in practice he's quite a bit squishier. Less armor as well, less leadership, faster, considerably faster. Similar charge and weapon strength. Even better weapon strength on Azag, plus poison. So, you know, maybe those two are actually a better comparison than many others you might think of. Azag, not a super common pick, not as common as he used to be, still very good, don't get me wrong, in the right situation. But yeah, as far as where you would use Eltharion, again, factions which you want to contest air heavily, like Bretonia as well. I don't know, he probably gets deleted by Fae Double Paladins, but maybe you can single them out using the Griffin, and try and, you know, snipe individuals all at once. The Tempest also obviously very good against stuff like Pegasus Knights. I mean, as we saw there, can be pretty good against Warriors of Chaos. I think like Beastmen too, probably. A kind of a hit-and-run Griffin Lord can be nice for quick terror bombs there. And while you don't necessarily need the Tempest, Soul Quench and just the sustain of Apotheosis can be quite nice also. Yeah, basically he's cheaper than taking like a Dragon Caster, right? Because you can obviously take a High Mage on a Moon Dragon, which will give you a somewhat similar type. Obviously, it's a little bit different. You've got a slightly different stat profile here. In fact, if we look and just compare 1-to-1 with a similar spell loadout. What did I have? Just the first two? Yeah. So with just Hand of Glory and Apotheosis, more realistic kit, probably just Apotheosis and Tempest. Maybe you bring Soul Quench if you have the extra points. But you can see here that the Mage, even with yeah, I mean, I guess pretty close actually if you go fully kitted. Not fully kitted, but, you know, reasonable kit on Eltharion gets him pretty close to the Mage. The Mage has more weapon strength, but in just about every other way is worse. So more HP as well is impactful, but you got to keep in mind the difference of armor. You do gain breath attacks as well, slower speed, less leadership, less charge bonus. So Eltharion's definitely more of a hit and run type character than the dragons, which are almost kind of like flying missile units in a way that also have some charge potential. Griffins generally, use them to hit and run and take advantage of that high charge bonus as much as possible. Anyway, a lot of rambling today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.